Okay. Oh, well, welcome everyone to this is our third investor series for 2025 for the Melbourne Investing Club. And look, I think just to introduce the club, it was formed during the 2020 or so with Sergio Benici and myself during the lockdowns here in Melbourne, actually. And it really was a chance to get together for people who are interested in investing to talk about investing themes and the like. And it was also an opportunity for a lot of the students in Melbourne, especially overseas students and people studying commerce, to get to know each other, to understand about the career options available to them, to understand about the study options. So look, it's really grown hugely, and we're excited to do these interviews. So today we're here at Grace Park Hawthorn Club, a local tennis club for myself, and we're joined with Peter Robinson, who's also a member of the club, a very esteemed member, and he's had a wonderful career in aviation, defence, and finance. So welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Jimmy. Great to be here.
And so we'll always start off with a few just quick-fire questions, just to a few yes or no ones. So first of all, Peter has lived, I think, in Melbourne for a while now. What would be your favourite restaurant?
Well, I think we're trying to eat a lot of organics these days, so I don't eat out a lot, but simple fare Japanese is probably the favourite go-to at the moment. There's a little place in Camberwell called Taku. Really good quality food. Service terribly slow, but that's okay because the food makes it all the worthwhile.
Okay. Peter is an aviation person. What would you say is your favourite aeroplane?
Well, my favourite aircraft is the one I flew, which was the FA-18 Hornet. So multi-role fighter, speed of Mach 2. Yeah. I've taken her to 54,000 feet at the ultimate, and that was where the sky is black. You can see stars. The curvature of the Earth is really, really clear. So a really, actually quite easy aircraft to fly, but really hard to operate.
I'm from Wellington, and Wellington's one of the hardest airports to land in. I don't know if you've flown there, but crosswinds and things. What would you say is your favourite holiday destination?
That's easy, because I do wingsuit base jumping. Yeah. So I jump off cliffs. And so in the north of Italy, there's a place called Lake Garda. And just to the north of Lake Garda, there is a series of cliffs in the Dolomites. Okay. It is paradise.
Wonderful place to go. And the last one, we're here at the Grace Park Hawthorn Club. Peter and I are tennis players. We do our best on the court. Who's your favourite tennis player?
Apart from yourself?
Apart from myself.
Apart from you? Well, I think Sinner is probably my favourite.
Yes.
Sinner. He's incredibly powerful, consistent, quick, and he's able to drive an incredible forehand with lots of topspin. So yeah, just lots to like about him.
Yep, and I would go the same actually.
Oh, really?
He's got a bit of style about him, a bit of class, and yeah, he's good to watch.
Great talent.
So let's see, US Open's coming up. Okay, so we'll kick off with a few questions with Peter. Now we'll just start with a bit of a chat about his career. Now this year you finished up after 12 years with KPMG, building towards the latest role, which was the lead partner for the defence industry. I guess it's a big call to finish up, Peter. Why was it the right time to exit the big role at a big four company and go into freelance consulting business?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been a lot of turmoil in the consulting industry, not just locally, but globally. Massive reduction in consulting spend. There was a huge boom around the COVID timeframe. Lots of money being spent. We grew significantly as a business. So about a year ago, the business I looked after was generating 250 million in consulting fees. I had 26 partners, 60 directors, about 1,300 consultants at any one time on the 400 engagements that we operated with defence. It was big business. Then came a scandal with PwC. Yes. So a tax practitioner there inappropriately used information, breached 3 non-disclosure agreements in the process, and shared information internally inside PwC to help them potentially account for tax changes. That then rippled through the industry. There was a Senate inquiry into consulting. We got called before multiple Senate estimates to answer questions, and we had a ABC Four Corners show called the shadow state
Yes.
done on us.
Yes.
There's a lot of incorrect, specious
Yeah.
issues raised.
Yes.
And we came through it actually, I think, totally clean, and we had done nothing wrong. But it caused a whole lot of issues around the business, and the business retracted.
Yep.
I was a fairly expensive partner. I was well
Yep. Gotcha.
paid, and I felt if I didn't make room
Yeah.
for the juniors to come through, then there'd be no progression. So I thought the right thing to do was to step away, give the business a bit of breathing room, and allow for the next generation to come forward.
Good on you, Peter. But you worked your way up within a big corporate, KPMG. I often say to people who are starting their career, basically these corporates are pyramids, and you think ahead in your career, because look around you. Often there's not that many people who are in their 40s or 50s, and it's just because it's a pyramid. So you've got to be good to last, and the longer you're there, it means you're very good. So what do you think has given you that longevity? How did you sort of, what was the things about yourself you think that made you be able to climb the hierarchy?
I've always been a believer in doing what's right for the business. So rather than trying to push or promote myself, I've always tried to think of what is best for others rather than best for self. And that can be hard, but I think if you're consistent with that, eventually people recognise that. So it's being proactive, not being passive. It's about trying to be honest and act with integrity at all times, but also to think long-term with your behaviours. It's easy to feel the pressure of meeting the short-term targets that a business sets for you, and they're for numbers, revenue, profit, those sort of issues that you're trying to address. But behaviours long-term are really important. I used to inappropriately acquire the yin and yang symbol. I really like it, this idea of balance. And you need to balance the short-term measures with the long-term behaviours that gives you longevity with your client. Because if you chase the short-term sugar hit of trying to meet a hard profit target, and you behave inappropriately along the way, clients eventually will work that out and they'll stop coming back to you.
Gotcha. What about, and then as part of that, as you move up the chain, a lot of it's leadership and building teams, and ultimately you can't do everything yourself. So you've got to get other people to work for you, to do what you want effectively. I think there's a good quote, teamwork is basically, it's a bit of a joke, but teamwork is basically a whole lot of people doing what I want. That's but what's your approach? What's been your approach to building good teams?
I think it's really important to empower your team. So how do you do that? How do you effectively empower and delegate? That's a really tough question. I think the most important thing is to set a really simple strategy. Why is that important? It's a complex world, and often the business environment is uncertain. So if you have a simple strategy that people can relate to and understand, then they're more likely to be able to apply it in a complex environment. And I think also a simple strategy allows you to articulate back to your client what you represent. But within that, you've got to set the right guiding light, the Northern Star. Because often your team is distributed. They're either not in your office or they're on client site. So how do you give them the right guidance around what they do and how they behave, so that they can account for the environment they're in, the demands of the client on them at the time, and then produce the right outcome? And so we used to have a phrase that we used to carry as our catchcry, which was to do what's best by the warfighter, the organisation, and the taxpayer. And nowhere in there did we mention the firm. That was really important because the warfighter was the end user of capability that we're helping defence deliver, in this case defence. The organisation is important because you've got to recognise that there are nuances, there are hierarchies, there are demands, and there are drivers inside an organisation you need to be mindful of. And you've got to do things that best by the taxpayer. If you have that as your guiding light, as your staff have that as the guiding light when they're at the coalface, they're more likely to deliver a really good outcome. Then you've got to give them the opportunity to raise issues, and communication is really important. You've got to be a really good communicator, I think, as a leader. And it's funny because when you think about communication, people will think about transmission. How do I speak? How do I present? How do I articulate a vision? But probably the most important part about communicating as a leader is listening. We've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. That's the ratio of listening to talking. There's something in that for us. I think it's really important to listen hard And listening hard is not just nodding. Listening hard is really hearing what's being said and potentially being able to articulate that back to the person to demonstrate you've really heard them. There's often a fear with going out and listening to your people, particularly at the coalface, because you think I'll be overwhelmed as a leader. I think the opposite is actually true. The more you listen to them, you don't need to necessarily commit to taking everything on.
No.
But I think you need to listen hard. If you don't listen hard to what's going on at the coalface, you will lose empathy with what they're dealing with. You'll also misunderstand what are the key client drivers. So that idea of how to communicate in a way through listening is important. But I do think you need to be, my time in the Air Force as a fighter pilot, I learned about the importance of being concise and clear with communications, because often you'll be practicing or operating in an exercise space where you're having to communicate with multiple parties at high speed, and you've got to be clear and concise when you do that. I think you can take that into the business world, because often we get overwhelmed with emails that are really, really long, and we think we're doing people an advantage by transmitting a lot of data. Actually, you're wasting their time. So it's actually a little bit discourteous to send a long email. You're better off to be really tight and concise and respect their time, because not everyone has the bandwidth to deal with a long tirade.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting. I understand in aviation and airways, or in the air traffic control, there's a lot of protocol around how you speak. You know, basically, the traffic controller says it's very direct, and they get trained to be very direct and assertive in what they say to pilots. Things like that. Maybe we could learn from that. So what about in terms of, there's a number of our members at KPMG doing internships or at PwC, whatever it might be. Interesting, consulting defence. A lot of people might say, do you know, I'm actually very interested in that. It sounds a lot more interesting than some of the other fields. You know, what was the background of most of the people on the team? How did they get into these sort of roles? We
had a really nice mix, and that was really powerful. I think you need people who understand the domain, understand the environment of defence and the context, the language. But you also want to bring different thinking. So being able to draw upon other industry players or other expertise is really important, and you're most powerful as a team, particularly the idea of bouncing ideas off each other. You get a richer product if you socialise concepts and if you test those with others that maybe have a different perspective from what you're used to. The hard part about defence, and I touched on it before, is the lingo, the jargon, the TLAs, three-letter abbreviations. There is a multitude of them, and even I've been around for 30 or 40 years in this space. I don't know all of them either. The problem is, if you are trying to bring new players in that haven't experienced defence before, you can actually make it quite an exclusionary environment unintentionally, because you use this lingo that people won't follow. And so they're trying to contribute, but they don't want to look like fools by going, but what does that mean? And what does that mean? And I can't really understand exactly where this argument is going. So I think it's important, if you are going to try and introduce new people into the team, that you're really conscious about the language that you use, not swear words, but how you describe the problem, the challenge, the environment, so that they can feel that they can contribute. Otherwise, you'll get a diversity of folk potentially joining you, but they'll be hesitant to really engage.
We have the same thing in the energy industry where I work. We talk about megawatts and megawatt hours and MVA, and it just makes it harder for people to be honest. Plain English. Now, if we just go back a little bit here, so defence, you started off in the Defence Force as a fighter pilot, as a flight commander, as aviation instruction. I guess you could have presumably built a career in the Defence Force. What sort of prompted you to move into the private sector?
Yeah, it's a funny question. I was actually lucky enough I joined at 17, straight out of year 12. So I was quite young, became a fighter pilot at around the age of 22, 23, and then got promoted to a squadron leader at the age of 29. So I was relatively young, and it felt like I was heading in the right direction. But I got to the stage where it was a fairly intense occupation. I was working, I think, 70 hours a week on occasions as a young chap, flying F-18s, prepping for the flight, prepping for deployments overseas. And there was only 12 of us in the squadron, in the fighter squadron. We were meant to be manned for 18, but it's just hard to get people through the process. So overwhelmed a little bit by the workload. And I got to the stage where I'd try to relax at night, go to bed and sleep. And I'd mentally think, how do I relax? I'll go and imagine I'm lying on a beach watching a wave. And then the wave would start, crashing on the beach. But before I knew it, I'd see a radar cursor, and then there'd be a hostile data point here. And then before I knew it, I'd be back into an intercept. And I just couldn't unwind. And I thought, why am I getting so excited and worked up? This was in the mid-90s when the prospect of conflict and using their skills was really quite low. It was a very benign time in the world. And I thought, getting all excited about this, I'm probably not going to use these skills. Where can I try and apply myself in the real world for cut and thrust? And that's why I decided to head out into the business world, made a plan to go, I want to do a challenging job where I'm actually engaging in activity that's real, and it's not meaningful necessarily, because what I was doing was meaningful, but is real.
And then at that time, I was going to say, first of all, I was going to say magnesium tablets. I do magnesium tablets, obviously.
Is that right? Okay, good tip.
Anyway, but so at that time, in those late 1990s, you then did your MBA, I believe.
I did.
And I guess it's interesting, actually, because I think a lot of people, some of our members, for example, who are in their 30s, and they're sort of saying, because you sort of hit a natural, even you'd probably see this perhaps in some of the accounting firms and things, is you see people, you hit a bit of a progression, and then the pyramid gets narrower, and so you need to do something to differentiate yourself, or maybe it might help you differentiate yourself. And I think a lot of people then do an MBA for that reason. In your case, maybe you were very technical, or you were in quite a narrow field in a sense. Did you do the MBA to try and give you a broader skill set for that purpose? And how did it work out? Was it worth it?
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting. I think particularly for a consultant, you might start out, you need to be quite broad and flexible and adaptable as a consultant at the early days, but eventually you're going to have to specialize. What are you known for? What's the go-to skill or the go-to problem that you can solve? And then as you get more senior as a partner, you actually need to be more diverse, because you need to sit across a range of projects. So you have this broad, narrow, and then broadening. I think the MBA is a really powerful piece to give you that next step up to the broadening. How do I run a business? The thing I found most advantageous about an MBA was actually doing the finance elements. Because when I started, I really didn't understand what a balance sheet was. I didn't understand cash flow. By the time I finished the MBA, I really was quite comfortable. And that's important, particularly as an executive, because sometimes people will use information as a weapon against you. And if you don't really understand the right financial levers of a business, if you don't understand how to pull a pivot table out of SAP, and I'm quite good at SAP, then you're relying on others to provide data for you, and that can be misconstrued or misapplied. So the power of an MBA is it gives you the confidence to be able to understand the financial levers, what really drives a business, but then also to be able to interrogate that data. So I found it very valuable. And honestly, I would have lost control of some of the businesses that I've been responsible for if I wasn't able to go in and pull out a pivot table and ask the right questions of that data that were important to me, rather than allow somebody else to interpret.
I remember I was at Meridian Energy, big engineering business in New Zealand, and I'd been there 4 or 5 years, and so I'd done well. I was up to a certain level, but then you come up against the engineers, the jargon, and so I ended up doing a master's in engineering studies. And just for that purpose, just so I could it just meant you're a little bit dangerous, and you could just second guess people a little bit.
Absolutely.
It was so I think that's some good advice there. So the elephant in the room for a lot of people, you're a fighter pilot. It's a lot of people's dream, I guess, perhaps as a child. And, is that what you always wanted to do when you were growing up? And, where did the love of aviation come from originally?
Yeah, look, I was very lucky. I wouldn't underestimate the luck element of being able to get through the process, get selected, and then go through the training. When I joined a long time ago, when I was a young lad, it was the year after Top Gun had come out. So there were 2,500 applicants for 14 positions inside pilot's course, and of those, 14, only 8 of us got through pilot's course, and then of those 8, only 2 of us went on to fly fighter. So it was, there's a lot of luck involved.
Yes.
My passion for aviation probably came as a small child. My uncle had been a radio gunner in Lancasters in World War II.
Mm.
And he didn't want to talk about it much, but you could sense that there was something pretty powerful about having a relative who had been in that role. And part of me wanted to actually show him that I could contribute, but also have a meaningful conversation with him at some stage about aviation. So I was interested. Then I sort of drifted as I got to my teenage years. I got a little bit more interested in medicine. My dad was a doctor, but then Dad took me out of being a doctor, and I circled back to aviation and joined up and applied. The only sad part about that was even after I became a fighter pilot, I approached my uncle to say, "Hey, will you talk about your experience now?" And he never did. He never did. He was only 18 when he was in World War II. He came back and he actually did medicine and became a doctor himself. And I firmly believe that's because he had terrible guilt over what he was involved in as a bomber crew over Germany during World War II. And I think he wanted to atone for that and became a something.
So you always had this interest, and then you came to university, and I think a lot of people, a lot of people are first year or early in their university here, and they're saying, well, what should I study? You studied Bachelor of Science, and you did these difficult subjects, maths and physics. That was you were always thinking to go down this route as aviation.
Yeah, I think I knew that one of the things about the military is they tend to embrace technology, and technology is often centered on things like maths and physics. So I had thought that would help me in my flying career, and it definitely did. But that's why I chose those difficult subjects. Can I tell you though, a maths physics double major? Yeah. That's hard work. Yeah. A lot of long hours. It's quite complex. Yeah. It was pretty stressful. So I don't know if I'd recommend a maths physics double major again, but the technical stream, really important. I think there's a great future. We need more scientists in this country. We need more technical folk. And we're always going to have to be able to embrace changing technology. And these are the sort of people that society will turn to, I think.
When we think about aviation, now it's a very interesting industry, but Western Sydney International Airport opens next year. I can recall a few years back, there was a narrative that, and we discuss it sometimes in our Monday night meetings actually, around aviation, is, the concept of peak oil, and basically there might be short-term fluctuations, but is oil basically on the way up, which will obviously be the direct input cost against aviation. Yeah. There's also the narratives around post-COVID. So Australian international travel has come back almost to where it was. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think about the future for the aviation industry?
I think we're probably going to see rising costs over time. We're still yet to hit peak oil. We're good at finding it in different strange places, but I think the cost of extraction is going to go up. Yes. I'm not sure necessarily that the traditional use of fossil fuels in aviation is going to see things get cheaper. Clearly, there's going to be alternative fuels that are looked at, and there's also electric aircraft. The electric aircraft are probably going to be short haul. Yeah, they're not going to be long distance traveling. There's a physical limitation around how much energy you can store in a battery that's going to carry people long haul. But I think you can offset some of the consumption of those fossil fuels for short haul that might free up capacity into long haul. But I would suspect that long haul is still going to have a strong future, but I think the cost will gradually rise over time. It'll become more exclusive. Yeah, it used to be exclusive. Air travel used to be for the very well heeled, probably 30 or 40 years ago. It was quite rare to be able to go overseas. Yes. We've gone through a halcyon period where it's been available to almost everybody to travel long range, go to quite exotic destinations through air travel. I think it's going to be a little bit harder. It's going to be a little bit more exclusive as the costs go up.
So you've touched on it a little bit here, and one of the areas close to my heart is decarbonisation and the sustainable aviation fuel, and we're looking at that a little bit at my work. What do you think about that? Aviation is very tough because there's a long supply chain to get aviation fuel into an aircraft at a specific airport. and there's very closely guarded commercial positions at specific airports.
Mm.
Have you looked at sustainable aviation fuel? Do you think there's a good future for that?
Well, I'm not as well versed as you are probably in this space, but I do know that Jet A1 is the typical aviation fuel, and it's very high quality, high grade.
Mm.
Hard to replace. I think you can blend it with some synthetics or some alternative fuels, but realistically, you're not going to be able to drive the long range, as we said before, for the weight of the fuel with the current engines without having really high quality fuel. And that's going to require, I think, ongoing dependency. Whether you can look at hydrogen powered fuel cells, a little bit harder in aviation again because of the way a flame works inside a jet engine. Electrics we did touch on. So I think it's going to be, is there an opportunity for other industries to use the synthetic fuels that free up those traditional fuels for aviation, maybe? I think it's going to be hard to really see in the next decade or two full replacement with those alternative fuels in aviation just yet. But I might be proven wrong.
Now, I can't have a podcast, in 2025 without mentioning Donald Trump.
Yes.
And I'm sure a lot of your customers are coming to you and saying, well, how do we position ourselves to win US defense contracts, or how do we know the future flashpoints? How do you interpret US foreign policy? What do you think? Is the world safer than 1 year ago, pre-November 2024 US election?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I think the world's a very uncertain, unstable place at the moment. So if you look at what's the definition of a world war, it's a war between major powers on multiple fronts. We're kind of almost there, to be honest. If you look at what's happening in the Ukraine, you've got Russia, a major power that's dealing with or trying to dominate Ukraine, which is backed by NATO effectively. You've got terrible turmoil in the Middle East, which Iran is backing its proxies, which is Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, in the constant harassment of both the US and Israel assets in that region. And then you've got obviously the rising threat of conflict in Taiwan. Now, Xi Jinping, the head of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has directed his troops to be ready for retaking of Taiwan in 2027. Now that's his words, not mine. So what does that look like is going to be the real question. Is that going to be a shock and awe campaign to take Taiwan? Unlikely, because Taiwan has taken a hedgehog or porcupine strategy. You might take us, but you're going to really hurt along the way. And I think the Chinese recognize that. What's more likely, and it's what they've demonstrated through some of the recent exercises and Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan about 18 months ago. What did the Chinese do? They set up a range of blockade zones around Taiwan. So I suspect that's what they'll do with Taiwan, is they'll set up an exclusion zone and they'll just strangle that region. And that's really dangerous though, because that's how conflicts can often spiral out of control when an embargo zone is either breached or pushed. What does that look like? So there's a lot of uncertainty. What Donald Trump and his regime is doing is saying to allies, we are sick of funding the role as being the world police. You all need to stump up and contribute meaningfully as middle powers or as major powers. And I think that's a reasonable thing to ask, because a lot of the NATO nations has allowed their spend on defence to really fall away. Germany at one stage were only spending 1.3% of their GDP on defence. They've now upped that to well over 2.2%, but that's took a prompt. So I think the philosophy which they have, the US has, is peace through strength. I think that's a reasonable position to take. I think if you create weakness, then people will push into that vacuum. People being powers that have nefarious intent. So I think the Trump regime is trying to create a stable environment in one that's very, very uncertain. So I think the intent is there, but it may seem chaotic to those that aren't familiar with exactly what the strategy is.
Yeah, it's certainly a fascinating time. There's some of, if we just think about stocks for a second, not specific stocks, but some of the best stocks have been in drone technology. There's a couple of local ones even in Australia. And anecdotally, I understand that there's been a lot of use of drones in the Ukraine war. It's been one of the perhaps that war might become known for the push forward in that technology. Do you think that is the case? Do you think that this drone technology is going to be sort of a key thing going forward in the defence for everyone?
No doubt that automation, drone technology, supplemental capability through technologies is definitely going to be more and more part of modern warfare. It's interesting, the drone example, particularly in the Ukraine. A lot of people relate drones to aircraft and air power. Actually, the way drones are being used in Ukraine is like artillery. So they're positioning relatively closely to the asset they're targeting. They're flying over the top and they'll literally drop a grenade down a tank turret. Or probably the most successful campaign was about a month and a half ago, where the Ukrainians took out $2 to $3 billion worth of strategic bombers from Russia using about $2 million worth of drones. Like, that was an incredibly successful campaign. But effectively, they parked some trucks outside of the key bases and then at short notice in a coordinated way launched these drones over the fence no more than 2 kilometres to drop these grenades. That's a form of artillery more than it is a change in air warfare. But drones are increasingly being part of air warfare. They're increasingly part of subsea warfare, and they even use them on land for resupply, refuel of assets, but also for reconnaissance activity. So absolutely, drone technology is a massive force multiplier and can give you an asymmetric effect against superpower, as the Ukrainians are showing with their incredible ingenuity and tenacity.
Now, a couple more questions. Things get his Friday afternoon here at Grace Park. Now, Peter has very generously given his time to write a strategic plan or assist in that. And as you can see, the fruits of it are around us, Peter. Things are livening up.
Very much.
Now, a couple more questions. So you're now principal of a consulting business. Now, you could be, Peter, you could be out there playing tennis with your time, playing padel, playing pickleball all day. There must be some specific problems or issues that you're keen to get involved in that have sort of prompted you to start this business and get involved.
But there are. So I'm fascinated with risk. I feel like I've done some risky things in my life. Flying fighter aircraft is relatively risky. I lost a few friends doing that. I've more recently done wingsuit base jumping. That's pretty risky. We lose people all the time, unfortunately, in that sport. It's the deadliest sport in the world. And I've thought about how do you apply that risk profile to business. So businesses are fun. You have a requirement, particularly for a board, to deal with both performance and governance, and risk is a big part of that. But how do you actually get visibility of the risks? Often you'll bring a consultant in to write a report on your risk. You'll table that report and people will read it and then it'll get parked on the shelf. But I think, how do you make that risk live and visible and upfront so that the business is conscious of those risks and how they are managed? So that's where I want to try and get to, is I'm building a tool that will provide visibility of risks and talk to or demonstrate and show what those risks are doing, how they're moving, how fast are they coming into your business, and whether they're going to hit your front, middle, or back office. And then how do you use artificial intelligence to keep that updated? How do you scrape your external environment? Look at things like financial risks, supply chain risks, cyber risks, but then also how do you look at your internal environment to see what's going on inside your business, to say, should my risk change because of activity inside my business? A classic example, I think, is Boeing. So the aircraft. So Boeing had a massive quality failure with the MAX aircraft.
That's right, yeah.
There was quite a lot of chatter at the lower quality manager level that expressed concerns about production. And yet that was being filtered as it got higher and higher. It's a classic, traffic light going from red to amber to green by the time it gets to the seniors in the business. Whereas I think if you'd had the ability to sort of feel the pulse of the business a little bit lower down, and go, hang on, there's a lot of traffic going on about all the issues. Is there a way that I can link it in a little bit further to that? They might have been able to uncover the problem before it caused multiple crashes and multiple deaths. So I think that idea of how do I get across my risks in real time is something I'd love to help businesses do it.
It's a good one, Peter. You must, and it's really a skill set. It's a way of thinking that can be applied to a lot of different problems. Yeah. So last question, Peter. So if you were starting your career now, a lot of people are that will be watching this, and you were, one of our members thinking what to study or perhaps what industry to get involved in, because a lot of degrees, if you do a commerce degree, it doesn't tell you much about where you're going to be working, because you can apply that in lots of different industries. What advice would you give to some people starting out today?
I'll hark back to a previous employer of mine with Danny Wallace. So Danny Wallace is quite famous because in the TV series The Block, every year he buys 3 or 4 homes. And he has a unique bidding style where he'll frustrate the auctioneer by bidding $2,132,332 44 cents, for example. And why does he say that? Because the auctioneer has to repeat the price back, and it slows the auction down and gives him control. He was a fascinating character, very quirky, but the best business plan I've ever come across. And he said to me, the key to a successful business is to find something you're passionate about, find something that you have a niche in, and be able to make money from it. So that's what I'd say. Find something you're passionate about. That's going to be relevant in the future. And you can make money from, because you need to survive, you need to feed yourself, you need to be able to invest in your future. So those 3 things are probably the best way to guide yourself with your career. And it's never a straight line. You're going to have to take diversions along the way and build your skill sets. But I think find something that really drives you and excites you, because you'll never feel like you're working if you're doing something you thoroughly enjoy.
Okay. Well, Peter, thanks so much for your time. We're here at Grace Park. We've got the pennants up on the wall here. Peter's been part of multiple successful teams. So look, hopefully we could have some hits over the next few weeks.
Well, can I say that Jimmy, I've played against Jimmy a few times, and he is a very talented tennis player. He absolutely dissects my game like a frog. And anyone who has any tips as to how to best Jimmy, please contact me directly. I'm all ears.
Okay, thanks very much, Peter.
Thanks.
Thanks for your time.